We always talk about the criminal getting caught. But what happens when the criminal IS the cop? December 28, 2024, Los Angeles, California, 2:30 in the morning. A 17-year-old named Daniel is asleep in his girlfriend's high-rise apartment in the Koreatown neighborhood. It is late. It is quiet. And then a knock at the door. 4 men, tactical vests, badges on their chests. They announce they are law enforcement there to execute a search warrant. Daniel opens the door, because why wouldn't he? They look like police. Within seconds, his girlfriend is in handcuffs. Real handcuffs, the kind issued by the Los Angeles Police Department. Daniel is pinned down. A voice tells him that if he doesn't hand over the hard drive with his Bitcoin private keys, they will shoot him dead right there on the 18th floor. Daniel hands over the drive. $350,000 in Bitcoin, gone in minutes. The men vanish into the Los Angeles night, and Daniel calls the real police. Here is the part that changes everything. One of those 4 men was a real police. His name was Eric Halem, a 13-year veteran of the Los Angeles Police Department. He didn't just use a disguise. He used actual lap-issued handcuffs. He monitored police radio traffic after the robbery to track the department's response. He texted his crew updates from a law enforcement contact. He called someone he knew Fedwise. He knew exactly how the system worked. He had helped build it, and he used every single piece of that knowledge to rob a teenager. But that's only one story, because the title of today's video cuts both ways. Today, we are going deep into what happens when cops are the ones being robbed, and what happens when the person doing the robbing is a cop themselves. 2 sides of the same coin, both real, both documented, both going to leave you with serious questions about the people we trust to keep us safe. We have 3 cases lined up for today, each one more wild than the last. We are going to go through every detail, who was involved, what happened, and where things stand right now. Before we go any further, which story do you think it was? A cop being robbed, or a cop doing the robbing? Comment your answer right now. I want to see the split. Let's start in Philadelphia, because this first case is a kind of thing that sounds like it could not possibly be real, until you realize it was all caught on camera. Sunday morning, just past 7 a.m., a 42-year-old Philadelphia police officer, 8 years on the force, assigned to the 22nd District, had just finished an overnight shift. He left the police headquarters building and started walking home. In theory, this should have been the safest part of his day. He had just come off duty. He was walking out of a police station. The sun was barely up, but on the 2100 block of West Oxford Street, an after-hours club had just let out. The street was clogged with people. A black BMW was blocking the intersection, and the officer waited. For minutes passed. Nobody moved. Finally, the officer got out and asked the crowd to clear a path. That's when a man in the crowd, who would later be identified to police by the nickname Duke, stepped up. Words were exchanged. Then fists. The officer was attacked. He identified himself as law enforcement and showed his badge, hoping that would de-escalate things. It did the opposite. Duke pulled a gun. A second man, standing 6 feet, 8 inches tall, joined the fight. The officer was beaten. His personal firearm was stolen from him. He was then struck by a car as he tried to get away. An off-duty officer, coming home from a shift protecting other people. Beaten, robbed, and run over. A block from his own precinct. Police launched an investigation immediately. Surveillance footage from nearby cameras captured the incident and helped identify suspects. Within days, a man named Coleman was arrested and charged with criminal conspiracy, aggravated assault, assault of a law enforcement officer, robbery, theft by unlawful taking, and weapons violations. Later that week, Duke himself was also arrested. The officer's stolen gun was recovered. 3 women connected to the incident came forward voluntarily to speak with investigators. The case moved quickly, which is what tends to happen when the victim is a police officer. But that question lingered. Would the investigation have moved as fast if it had been anyone else on that sidewalk? Do you think crimes against police officers get solved faster than crimes against regular citizens? What does that say about the system? Now let's go north, to New York City, the Bronx, Hunts Point neighborhood. A different kind of robbery, and a robbery with a detail so specific it tells you everything about how bold criminals have gotten. A 23-year-old NYPD officer, just over a year on the job, gets out of his car on Garrison Avenue in the early morning hours. He's off duty. He's in his own neighborhood. He is not in uniform. A man pulls up and points a gun at him. And then, before taking anything, the man asks him directly, "Are you a cop?" Think about that for a second. The robber already had a gun on him. But he wanted to know, first, whether his target was law enforcement. Not because he was going to back down, because he specifically wanted the gun. The officer, outnumbered and outgunned with a weapon directly aimed at him, complied. The robber went through his pockets. He took the officer's service weapon. He took his wallet, which had his NYPD identification card inside. Then he was gone. The NYPD's Police Benevolent Association President Pat Lynch responded publicly, saying that not even the sight of a badge and shield was deterring these kinds of attacks anymore. That criminals were calculating their risks differently, and that some of them were factoring in the legal consequences an officer might face for fighting back as part of that calculation. It was a remarkable statement, essentially saying that the laws designed to protect people were being studied and gamed by the very people committing crimes. The stolen gun never made it back into the wrong hands, at least not publicly. But the fact remains, a police officer's personal firearm, issued by one of the largest police departments in the world, was stolen in broad daylight by a man who specifically asked if his target was a cop before taking it. Let's get a comment from you on this one. If a criminal specifically targets a police officer's gun, what do you think their plan is for it? Drop your theory below. Now we move to Chicago. And this next story is the one that sits with you. January 18th, 2023. Washington Heights neighborhood on the city's south side. Just before 1 p.m. An off-duty female Chicago Police Department officer is in her own neighborhood when she notices what appears to be a physical altercation between 4 people outside an apartment building. She approaches. She tries to break it up. 3 of the 4 people involved walk away. 1 stays. A 39-year-old man named Levon Smith. The officer and Smith continue talking. She is trying to calm the situation down. And then, without warning, Smith moves behind her, wraps his arms around her upper body, and goes for her gun. She tells him she will kill him if he doesn't stop. He tells her she's going to have to. What happened in the next 2 minutes was captured on surveillance cameras and released publicly months later. It is one of the most intense videos in recent Chicago law enforcement history. The officer fires once. Smith doesn't stop reaching for the gun. She fires again. He grabs her wrist, the one holding the weapon, and pulls her to the ground. They wrestle on the pavement. She fires a 3rd shot. Smith was taken to a hospital. He died 2 days later. The officer, standing on the sidewalk, shoes knocked off during the struggle, calls 911 herself. She is shaking. She cannot believe what just happened. "I can't believe this just happened to me," she says on the call. Investigators from the Civilian Office of Police Accountability reviewed everything. Security footage, body cameras, audio recordings, forensic DNA samples taken from the officer's weapon. Smith's own statement to police while in the hospital, before he died, in which he confirmed that he had tried to take her gun. In May 2024, the state's attorney's office issued a formal declination, meaning no charges will be filed against the officer. The evidence, they concluded, was unambiguous. She had acted in lawful self-defense. But here is what this case really reveals. She was off duty, in her own neighborhood, doing what cops do instinctively, stepping in when she saw trouble. And it nearly cost her her life. Not in a shootout with a criminal she was chasing. Not on a call that dispatch sent her to. In front of an apartment building. On a Tuesday afternoon. Comment below. Should off-duty officers intervene in situations they come across? Or is the personal risk too high? There's no wrong answer. I genuinely want to hear what you think. Everything we have covered so far, cops being robbed, attacked, disarmed, that is one side of this story. Now we flip it entirely. Because the most chilling case in today's video is not the one where a cop got robbed. It is the one where the cop was the one doing the robbing. Meet Eric Halem, 37 years old at the time of the crime. A resident of Potter Ranch in Los Angeles. On paper, at least the paper the public could see, he was a former lap officer who had served 13 years with the department before stepping back to a reserve officer role in 2022. He had other ventures going. He ran a luxury car rental business called Drive LA. He had developed an app for actors to audition remotely. He had talked to people about a reality television project. Eric Halem, from the outside, looked like a man building an empire, but the money wasn't coming in the way he wanted. And somewhere along the way, Eric Halem made a decision that would end everything. He decided to use everything the Lapt had ever taught him, every tactic, every tool, every piece of insider knowledge, to commit one of the most calculated home invasion robberies in Los Angeles in recent memory. The target was a 17-year-old named Daniel, a teenager who, by his own admission, had accumulated his Bitcoin holdings through methods that were themselves legally questionable. He was not a sympathetic figure in every way, but what happened to him was a crime regardless. Daniel had around $350,000 in Bitcoin stored on a hard drive, and somehow, through networks that investigators are still piecing together, Halem found out about it. The planning that went into this was extraordinary and deeply disturbing. Halem and his crew identified that Daniel was staying in a high-rise apartment in Koreatown. They obtained the building's access code through a co-conspirator who had previously rented a unit in the building. They knew which floor. They knew which apartment. On December 28, 2024, at 2:30 in the morning, Halem and a man named Michelman approached the building in tactical vests with badges displayed. They rode the elevator to the 18th floor. They knocked on the door and identified themselves as law enforcement executing a search warrant. Daniel let them in. Inside, the girlfriend was handcuffed immediately, using Lapt-issued restraints. The real thing. Daniel was physically subdued. Then came the demand. The hard drive. Hand it over, or be shot. Daniel handed it over. $350,000 in Bitcoin, transferred in the dark, in a high-rise apartment, while a 17-year-old and his girlfriend sat in handcuffs on the floor. Two other men, Luis Banuelos and Pierre Louis, had waited outside as getaway drivers. The whole operation, from entry to exit, was clean and fast. But Halem didn't stop there. After the robbery, he monitored police radio traffic. He wanted to know exactly what the Lapt was saying. How close were they? What did they know? He knew what frequencies to listen to. He had spent 13 years learning them. When two of his co-conspirators were arrested, Halem texted the others that he already knew, because someone he described as someone he knew Fed-wise had tipped him off. A contact inside federal law enforcement. He was building an escape route in real time, using a law enforcement network he had spent a career cultivating. This was not impulse. This was not desperation in a moment. This was an operation, planned by a man who wore the badge for 13 years and knew exactly how to use what he had learned to make himself harder to catch. But they caught him. Prosecutors built a case from the surveillance footage, the text messages, the DNA evidence, the testimony of Daniel himself, who described in court, in detail, what Halem and his crew did to him and his girlfriend in that apartment. The trial ran for 2 weeks in Los Angeles County Superior Court in early 2026. Halem did not testify. His defense attorney, Megan Maitia, argued that investigators had relied on selected text messages and that Daniel's account had not been independently corroborated. She pointed out that Daniel had admitted his Bitcoin was itself obtained through fraud. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on all counts. Kidnapping, robbery, home invasion. Halem was removed from the Lapt in March 2025 after the charges had already been filed. His sentencing was scheduled for March 31, 2026. Under California law, the charges he was convicted of carried the possibility of a life sentence in state prison. The Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan Hochman said it plainly, whether you once wore a badge and served in law enforcement or not, if you take part in violent crimes, you will be held fully accountable. Comment. Do you think Eric Halem's law enforcement background should result in a harsher sentence, or should it be treated the same as any other robbery conviction? What does justice look like here? There is one more layer to this case that adds an almost unbelievable detail. Before the Koreatown robbery ever happened, Halem was already under investigation by the California Department of Insurance. He and his brother had allegedly staged a crash involving a luxury Bentley convertible, filing a fraudulent insurance claim, submitting staged photographs, and then filing a second claim under personal insurance after the first was denied. Investigators said they staged a car on a tow truck and gave false statements to sheriff's deputies called to the scene. He had been arrested for that. He posted bond and was released. And then, while out on bond, being investigated for insurance fraud, he allegedly went and orchestrated a Bitcoin kidnapping. Eric Halem didn't snap. He escalated, step by step, crime by crime. The man who once swore to protect Los Angeles became the thing he used to chase. 3 cases, 3 cities, 3 completely different sets of circumstances, but all of them pointing to the same truth. The badge is not a force field. In Philadelphia, an 8-year veteran walked out of his own precinct and got beaten, robbed, and hit by a car before the sun was fully up. In the Bronx, a rookie officer was specifically targeted because a criminal wanted what was on his hip. In Chicago, a woman who stepped in to help strangers nearly died for it, and then had to wait more than a year for a formal acknowledgement that she had done nothing wrong. These are people who chose law enforcement as a career, who put on the uniform every single day knowing the risks. And those risks don't clock out when the shift ends. But the Eric Halem case sits separately from all of that, because it doesn't just show us what can happen to police officers. It asks us something far more uncomfortable about what can happen inside them. According to the FBI's own data, in 2023 alone, 378 law enforcement officers were shot in the line of duty across 308 separate incidents. Robbery-related calls are consistently ranked among the most dangerous situations officers face. The system asks an enormous amount of these people, physically, psychologically, morally, and most of them give what's asked of them and then some. But Halem represents something that the system doesn't want to talk about loudly. That the same training that makes an officer effective in the field also makes them, if they choose to go wrong, extraordinarily dangerous. Because they understand how investigations work. They know what evidence holds up in court. They know which radio frequencies to monitor. They know where the cameras are. They know how criminals get caught, because they spent years catching them. The most dangerous criminal in today's video wasn't a gangster or a random street robber. It was a man who knew the system from the inside and decided to weaponize it. That doesn't mean we paint every officer with the same brush. It doesn't mean the institution is irredeemably broken. The Philadelphia case ended with 2 arrests and a recovered weapon. The Chicago case ended with a formal legal finding that the officer was justified. Eric Halem was convicted by a jury in less than a day. The system did work, eventually, imperfectly, slowly in some places and quickly in others. But it worked. What it didn't do, what it rarely does, is answer the question of how someone like Halem passes every background check, serves 13 years, rises to a position of trust, and then ends up in a Koreatown apartment at 2:30 in the morning with handcuffs and a vest and a demand for cryptocurrency. What broke down? Where? And how many Eric Halems are still out there, wearing the vest, monitoring the radio, slowly crossing a line that nobody is watching closely enough to see? Final comment of the day. After watching all 3 of these cases, which one disturbed you the most, and why? I read every single comment on this channel. Drop yours. The title of today's video is When Cops Get Robbed. And by now you know that it means 2 different things at once. Sometimes a cop gets robbed by someone on the street, someone who sees a target and takes a chance. And sometimes a cop gets robbed of something harder to name. Their integrity, their oath, the version of themselves that they were when they first put on the badge. What happened to Eric Halem is a crime story. But it is also a story about the distance between who a person presents themselves to be and who they are becoming in the dark. And that gap, that space between the person and the badge, is where this kind of story always begins. If this video made you think, share it, talk about it. These are the conversations worth having. Like the video, subscribe to Behind the Crime, and hit the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. Every week, we go past a headline and into the story that most people stop reading too soon. I'll see you in the next one.